My name is Mike Tremont. I'm running a little bit different campaign than what we've had in this party in the past. And I think it's important for me to say up front, actually, all the things that are going to be said today, the following does not need to be said. I am not the good looks and charm candidate in this race, okay? As though that needed to be said. Indeed, if there's anything that I say today that makes you feel warm and fuzzy and good about the direction your government is going, we are miscommunicating. We're miscommunicating in a really important way. I spend a lot of time talking about criminal justice reform. And it's not just because a year and a half ago I retired from my second career as a police officer after 11 and a half years on the road. It's because we have the world's most oppressive criminal justice system in this country. When you consider what it does in conjunction with an insanely counterproductive war on drugs, I really believe that that is the case. We have a big cultural problem. I think we're going the right direction slowly, but there's some specific things that we can do to accelerate that. My primary idea is to replace qualified immunity with liability insurance, but there's a raft of other things that we need to talk about. We're also going the wrong direction in terms of a lot of economic policy. I spend a lot of time talking about monetary policy, and that's not just because I've got a lot of experience with the Federal Reserve System, which I have. I've met with the Federal Reserve Board and the board itself. My research on the banking industry has been cited by the Federal Reserve Chairman himself. I've worked with a lot of Federal Reserve economists, terrific people, but they cannot live up to the mandate that has been handed the Federal Reserve System. And while some of the other folks in this room may make fun of me for saying it repeatedly, we do need to end the Federal Reserve System. There is just no compromise that we should tolerate in this regard. The American public is ready for deep institutional changes, and we need to be the party that puts it out there and that backs it up. I also spend a lot of time talking about the economic policies that go wrong in the United States because of overspending. And it's not just because I was a White House economist working on the budget for a couple of years, something like 5,000 years ago, if I have my timeline correct. But because we're going in the wrong direction, both in terms of efficiency and how well our economy runs, but also in terms of ethics. We're now putting $31 trillion. I haven't checked in the last hour. I hope that number is not off terribly. Some of you, I know, pay a little more attention to the detail than I probably should. I think it's $31 trillion. We're putting that in the back of our future generations in the United States. To the extent to which that, we can plausibly claim to care about fellow Americans, we need to do something about that, and pronto. So I do spend a lot of time talking about decentralization and limiting the power of the government, but it's because we have real deep problems in the United States, and I believe the American public is ready to hear that in a way that they have not been willing to hear in the past. So if we run the right kind of campaign, I think we'll get a lot of traction, but it has to be a campaign that brands us without compromise. It has to be a campaign that talks about our principles. We need to lead with our principles. I believe it's our best weapon. You know as well as I do, the Republicans and Democrats have plenty of weird weapons at their disposal, and they use them. We need to talk honestly and openly, and we need to be forthright, and we need to stick by our principles, and that's why I'm in the race. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. I'm Jacob Hornberger. It's nice to be back here. It feels like sort of home week for me. 3 years ago, when I was vying for this party's nomination, I was going to state conventions saying, if you choose to go with the standard Libertarian Party presidential campaign that this party's run for the last 30 years, you're inevitably going to end up with your same standard 1 to 3% of the total vote. Joe beat me, fair and square. She ended up with 1.1%, which was within that category. I was going to convention to convention saying that if you want to break out into a higher level, the 7 to 10% level, maybe higher, you have to do something different. You have to do something bold. The problem was that when I announced late in November, it was followed by this incessant series of debates, which are not a format that lends itself to showing people what I mean by that, bold and different. This time, I'm doing it different. I announced last month with the objective of showing you all for the next 14 months how I would run a campaign against these Democrats and Republicans from a libertarian standpoint. If you go to my website at jacobforliberty.com, I will guarantee you, you have never seen a Libertarian Party presidential campaign like this in your lifetime. For 30 years, I've said that our principles are our greatest asset and that we need to fight with these principles. We need to fight as libertarians, not as Republicans. Go to my website, banner at the top, open the borders to the free movements of goods, services, and people. Second banner, abolish Social Security. No opt-outs, no phase-outs, no annuities. Get rid of the socialist program and leave family values and voluntary charity to take care of seniors who are in need. Third, ditch Medicare. Reject health savings accounts, Obamacare, and every other reform measure. You'll notice something else. I do something that no libertarian presidential candidate has ever done. I take a position on every single burning issue of our day. 23 issues with a written explanation and a video explanation. I want everyone to know in this country and in this party where I stand, why I stand from a libertarian standpoint. And you'll see that it's a website in motion. It's dynamic. I'm posting a 4-minute video practically every day in English and in Spanish, taking DeSantis, Trump, Biden, Haley, Pompeo, and all the rest of their ilk to task, not in a personal sense, but with their policies that are taking this country down. So 14 months from now, you will have a perfect picture of what kind of campaign that I would run if I'm your nominee. 14 months from now, you will have a choice. You can go the safe route, which is what happened last time. Go with the standard Libertarian Party presidential campaign. And that will garner you, I have no doubts, 1 to 3%. I think most likely 1 to 2%. I think the only way you can get to that 3% with the standard race is by recruiting another Republican governor to come in, call himself a libertarian, and run as a libertarian. But if you want the 7 to 10% category or higher, then come with me. Join my campaign, a campaign of principle for the party of principle, and I guarantee you, we will take it to that higher level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Last but not least, Mr. Olber.
Hi folks, my name is Chase Oliver. If you don't know me, I was the 2022 U.S. Senate candidate in Georgia most recently, but I've been a lifelong libertarian activist since about, well not lifelong, since about 2010. I want to talk about how I became a libertarian. I started out in politics because I opposed war, because I had friends of mine who were getting sent to the war in Iraq to fight a war based on lies the government was telling us. And so I became an anti-war activist. And because of that, I only thought, hey, there's two parties. I'm not a Republican, I'm a Democrat. So I joined the Democratic Party nominally. And up until 2008, when Barack Obama got elected, and I thought to myself, this guy's going to end the wars, he's going to stop the drones, he's going to close Gitmo, and we're going to give him the Nobel Peace Prize. One of those things occurred, and that's why I walked away from the Democratic Party, because I knew they weren't seriously an anti-war party. Fast forward to 2010, I was at the Atlanta Pride Festival. The Libertarian Party of Georgia was there, and John Mons himself waved me over and convinced me to become a libertarian, because he said, what's your one biggest issue? And I said, I oppose the war in Iraq with every fiber of my being. He said, you, sir, are a libertarian. And because of that, I've been active in this party since. I became an affiliate chair. I ran for Congress in 2020 to replace John Lewis after he passed away, and most recently I ran for the U.S. Senate. In the U.S. Senate race, I actually got challenged to do duopoly face-to-face in the debate stage. Yeah. And frankly, I got to kick Raphael Warnock's ass in the debate stage. And I was happy to do that. How did I do that? I spoke a message of dynamic liberty, of not distilling down the message of being able to speak what we know, that government does not solve the problems for us, people solve problems, not government. And so I am somebody who wants to take that dynamic energy and provide a real contrast to the two-party system. Because the truth is you're going to have Joe Biden who will be 83 on election day, you have Donald Trump who will be 79 on election day, and you have me, just under 40, ready to represent a new generation of libertarians. I want to activate Gen Z right now, because they're going to be the largest voting bloc in the next 10 to 15 years. If we don't have a messenger who's going to be able to inject liberty into that discussion with Gen Z, we run the risk of losing our relevancy as a party nationally. So I want to activate the next generation of libertarians with a bold message, an energetic message, and an empathic message that's going to break through the two-party static of mudslinging and negativity and fighting. I am not here just to tell you about how bad the government is. We know how bad the government is. I'm here to tell you how great liberty is. What's in it for you, your community, your family, your schools, how it's going to be better. That's the message that I want to put forward as a candidate. And that's how we're going to break through the two-party static of hatred and negativity. That's what we're going to do. And so I want you to join me. Go to votechaseoliver.com right now. Join my mailing list. Check out my issues. Look up the things that I did when I took Raphael Warnock to task. He couldn't even answer questions when I said, do you read a bill? That's the truth. So I'm willing to go and fight the duopoly, and I think we do have a unique opportunity to really challenge the two-party system in 2024 in a way this party has never done, and I'm ready to be that messenger with the energy to do it. Again, visit my website. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. I'll be here all day, and I love talking to libertarians, but even more, I like talking to non-libertarians. I like walking into a room that's hostile to me and convince people that liberty is the answer. I did that when I ran for Congress in Atlanta. I was the only libertarian among 6 Democrats in the field, and I was the one pushing for real criminal justice reform. I was the only candidate in my race who actually marched the street and got tear gassed by police to protest police. I'm the only candidate that was in that race who is still actively fighting Cop City in Atlanta right now. So I'm going to be able to take that message and push it forward nationally. I want to take the disruption that I gave the duopoly in Georgia, and I want to do that in 50 states and DC. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you all very much for those fantastic opening statements. I know that running as a libertarian candidate, especially when you're running for the nomination, it's pretty easy to talk about some of the evergreen libertarian issues that come up. But hopefully today maybe we can also inject some of the more relevant, topical, current issues that are going on in this country right now that you would have the opportunity to affect should you be elected president. So the first topic I'd like to talk about is censorship and free speech. As we know, the Twitter files have really exposed this kind of cabal of federal government agencies, government-funded NGOs, academic institutions, media outlets with ties to the intelligence community, and even the media platforms themselves, who systematically blocked speech from everyone from elected officials all the way down to everyday Americans. And that can have some real consequences. So, for example, during COVID, there could have been information that was disseminated that was blocked, that could have saved lives. So it really is a pretty serious issue. It's not just an expression issue, it could actually be a very serious bodily issue. So maybe I'll start with Mr. Hornberger. Since you went in the middle last time, you can go first this time. How central is free speech to a functioning democracy, and what should be done to dismantle the censorship industrial complex?
Obviously, free speech is central to a free society, but we shouldn't be too surprised about what's going on here. When our American ancestors demanded the enactment of the First Amendment, it was because they were assuming that the federal government would attract people that would destroy our liberty, our freedom of speech, our freedom of the press. That's why they said, we don't want to rely just on the Constitution. We need an express prohibition here to make it clear that these people get the message. These people are federal officials. So I don't get surprised when I see these assaults on liberty. I'd be surprised if there were no assaults on liberty. And so obviously we need to fight back, call them out on it. We also need to keep in mind that a private institution has the right to control whatever is published on that private forum, private newspaper, private radio station. If they don't want to allow some kind of message on COVID or whatever, that's their right. That's not censorship. That's private ownership. If you go to my website at jacobforliberty.com, I mentioned that I'm doing these 4-minute videos. I'm already taking these people to task. DeSantis, who I know receives a lot of sympathy here in this party. No Republican ever gets any sympathy from me. He went after Disney, and what did Disney do? All they did was exercise free speech. Now, they opposed his woke agenda. It doesn't matter to me whether you're pro-woke or anti-woke. They have a right to speak out against the government. And DeSantis is retaliating against them. He's also got his cronies over there in the legislature trying to weaken New York Times versus Sullivan to make it more dangerous to criticize him and other government officials. One final thing, and this is on Trump. Trump never explained why he didn't pardon Assange and Snowden. To me, their cases don't involve freedom of the press. It's free speech. They're over there disclosing war crimes and illegal conduct on the NSA, the CIA, the Pentagon. Why didn't Trump ever pardon them? And I'm calling him on account on my website. Explain it, Donald. Explain it before you run again. Tell us why you didn't pardon those two guys.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to go to Mr. Oliver it's on the same topic. That question, the tools that the executive branch has been using it started out fighting terrorism, and I think this works with your stance against war. These tools started to fight terrorism. Then they turned those tools to fight extremism, and now they're turning those same tools to fight misinformation, or as we like to call it, being wrong on the internet. So, what steps should we take to end that censorship, the censorship conduct of an out-of-control government?
Yeah, so it's first important to know what they're doing. Why are they attacking social media now? It's because government has already been able to inject themselves and guide and control and cajole traditional media, television, newspapers, for a long time. And now they're seeking to use that pressure of government, those tools and levers to actually maneuver and manage social media, which is actually the new area of information. We have so much more information available at our fingertips because of the information revolution that we've had and the internet we have. And so now government is using every tool they can to kind of clamp it down. Here's the good news. Like Jacob said, those are private platforms. They can post what they want to post, not post what they want to post. But the great thing about the internet is there's innovation in the marketplace. It will not be long if you keep censoring yourself Twitter or Facebook before the next Twitter or Facebook arises. And that's because we have the dynamism of the internet. And so government's going to keep trying to control, and they will, and we need to oppose it at every single level. But there is the good news that because of the innovation of the internet, we can actually skirt around them a lot. It's what we're doing with Bitcoin right now. It's what we're doing with crypto. We're sidestepping the fiat currency system using information technology. We can continue to do that at every level of government, and as libertarians, we need to be encouraging those steps. And so it's not just about internet censorship, it's about the dynamism and the marketplace potential of what we can do with the internet. And that's why government is trying to clamp down, because they want to control you. That's what government seeks to do. They seek to control you using lorded authority that they somehow manage to grab out of thin air. But the truth is we have the ability ourselves, each and every one of us, to make the change in our communities, and using the power of the internet and information technology, that is one of the ways that we're going to set the world free. And it'll be, like I said, we see it every day with cryptocurrency, we're seeing it with the dissemination of information, even with COVID being censored on Twitter, that information still got out there. Now you're seeing a lot of new influencers and people in the marketplace of information and news that wasn't there before. Let me just tell you this right now. The more they clamp down on traditional media, the more Joe Rogans grow. And the more Joe Rogans grow, they're going to try to clamp down on them. New Joe Rogans will appear. And so I want you guys to make sure that you're keeping on the lookout and not just taking everything at face value. I know that's really easy to say to wonderful libertarians, but harness the power of the internet. Don't just be afraid of what government's going to do. Use the power to fight back against government.
Thank you very much. The analogs to George Orwell's 1984 are just all too obvious here. I know Republicans have this saying, MAGA. Should libertarians be saying MOFA or make Orwell fiction again?
That would be a good idea. No, I wasn't around in 1948 when it was written, but I appreciate the reference. Look, everything you just heard is true, but it's not enough, and it's not enough by half. There are very specific things that your government has done in your name to empower itself to lead us to this position. In 1996, the government changed the Communications Decency Act to encourage platforms to conduct censorship on behalf of the government. The legislation was, in my view, inadvertently written by the stooges who put the legislation in place, and allowed these big tech companies to do things that they would not otherwise have been able to do, to censor and yet not be held accountable in court. That's not a special case that we allow anybody else in our society. We shouldn't be allowing it to them. So we do need reform to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. We need that fast. And the reason we need it is not because the situation we're in today stinks, although it does stink, because this is the vehicle through which the government agencies are able to drive in order to control these big tech platforms, but because technology is going to become even more important in our future. It's going to get worse before it gets better if we don't stop the federal government from intervening and taking advantages of these situations. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. Once in the White House, a Libertarian president would be able to, through executive order, stop agencies from working with high-tech platforms. Yes, technology companies do have a right to censor if they're working on their own and they wake up one morning and think that's a good idea, and they're able to withstand the court orders and court actions that come after that because people hold them accountable. That's all fine. We need to be able to hold them accountable, and we need to stop the federal government from manipulating them. In a regulatory environment like the one that we're in, technology companies cannot withstand effectively orders coming from the federal government. That's got to stop.
Thank you very much. So from censorship, I'd like to switch topics to taxation and spending. It's obviously indisputable that taxation is theft. But like a mugging, there's thefts that we see all the time, like the federal income tax. But there's like embezzlement. There's thefts that we do not see, like inflation. And so inflation caused by really the profligate spending of the federal government and Washington that's become too desensitized to that. So maybe I'd like to start with Mr. Oliver. I dare you to argue that printing, borrowing, and spending by the federal government is not a grave danger to every individual victimized by this federal government.
Can I pick truth instead? No, the truth is we have an inflation economy right now. It's the thing that most voters are feeling. When I ran for Senate in 2022, it was the issue that was most on the table for people. Food is costing me more money. Rent is costing me more money. Everything is costing me more money right now. And it is up to us as libertarians to educate about why that exists, namely the central banking system, the Fed, which we do need to end. And we also need to talk about keeping our fiscal house and fiscal responsibility in order. It's something that Republicans and Democrats, they say that line every time. We're going to cut the deficit, we're going to cut spending, and then they never do it. They're liars to you. The truth is, if I'm elected president, we're going to cut government by a lot. We're going to balance the budget immediately because we need to do that. It's not just for me and my generation, it's for my nephews and nieces, and probably their kids too that are going to be cycling through this debt crisis that we're having right now. So it is important right now to cut spending. It's important right now to balance budgets. It's important right now to end the central banking cartels that we have. How are we going to do that? We're going to educate people about what the criminals are doing. You're right, inflation is a hidden tax. Herman Cain, who was from my home state of Georgia, he used to call them sneak attacks. And I actually like that term a lot because people don't see that inflation is basically a tax increase on each and every American regardless. And who does it affect the most? Those with the least means. It's the people who are having to choose between medicine and the rent. It's the people who are having to go, how am I going to feed my kids this month when food keeps getting more and more expensive? And so it is actually the most insidious kind of tax because it's one that you don't see, it's one that affects the people with the least means the most, and we as libertarians have to be forceful against it, but we also have to be talking about the great things that happen when we balance the budget, when we get our economy under control. We're going to have an explosion in the middle class, we're going to have an explosion of prosperity that we have not seen at least since the 1990s, and probably we would even be greater than that. But to do that, we have to take the steps necessary to get us there. And that involves cutting spending right now, it involves balancing our budget, and it involves ending the Fed. No other way to do it, and there's no other way to message it. So that's what I would do.
Thanks very much. Would you agree that these economic terrorists in Washington should be pursued the same way we pursue other terrorists?
But more effectively. We need to get rid of them, not merely replace them, because as you know, with international terrorists, we just finance new ones. And that's not actually the way to go. I think term limits, by the way, is a horrible idea, but a bad idea whose time has come. So I don't mind supporting that. Look, we do need to end the Fed. We need to make the case that we need deep institutional change. And to do that, I believe that our communication has to be not just of a technical nature, but of an ethical nature. We need to be able to make the case to our fellow Americans, our brothers and sisters, that they are being ripped off, their families, their children are being ripped off. The people in our economy least able to afford it are the ones that are hurt most, not just by inflation, but by all types of government spending. We need to make the case that when your president talks about canceling school debt, that it's because someone else is going to pay for it. Just because your debt gets canceled doesn't mean that someone else isn't picking up the bill. This is an ethical problem. It's not just a technical economic problem. We need to be able to make that case. By the way, if we don't make that case, nobody else will. Do you think a Republican is going to effectively be able to make the case on an ethical basis and on a technical economic efficiency basis for getting our house in order? The last 2 decades, have any Republicans stood up for this case? No. Are you waiting for a Democrat to make this case? No. Thanks for the chuckle. I appreciate that. No, that's not going to happen. We, as libertarians, are the philosophical descendants of the people that founded this nation based on ethics, based on principles, not based on technical efficiency matters. And that's the way that we need to speak to our fellow Americans to push along the reforms that we know that we need to make for efficiency reasons, for technical reasons, but got to make the case based on ethics. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. How much federal spending should be cut? And the correct answer might be all of it.
Well, first of all, let me say I totally disagree with you about taxation being theft. Anybody that's had any experience with the IRS will tell you that taxation is armed robbery. Now, one of the funniest things about Joe Biden's State of the Union address was when he said, the Republicans are going to tamper with your Social Security. And immediately, you're a liar, you're a liar. We're as big a socialist as you are when it comes to the Social Security. and then Trump pulls a Biden just a few days ago. Trump says, DeSantis wants to reform your Social Security system, which DeSantis had wanted to do, and DeSantis comes back, no, I've rejected my own reform plan. I will save your Social Security. Look, when I talked about bold and different, I meant it. That when we talk about spending, how do you avoid talking about Social Security and Medicare and the military-industrial complex? These are the biggest components. It's not enough to sit here and say, I'm going to cut spending, I'm going to balance the budget. We got to talk about the biggest components: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the welfare state. My campaign is going to be built not on trying to figure out where I want to cut, whether I want to cut here, cut there, cut there. My campaign is going to be saying, what do you want out of your government? Do you want your government to be taking care of people through the coercive apparatus of the welfare state? Because we libertarians want to dismantle it all and leave charity and capital in private hands. And then dismantle the entire military-industrial complex. You have never heard a libertarian candidate say that. Dismantle the Pentagon. Dismantle the CIA, the NSA, the FBI. And restore a limited government republic to our land. And when you get rid of the Postal Service and leave first-class mail delivery in the hands of the private sector, the federal government has absolutely, virtually nothing to do at that point, which means they don't need hardly any money at all.
Speaking of dismantling the military-industrial complex, the next topic I'd like to move to is the topic of war. And then maybe the first question to Mr. DeMott would be able to go first, but what's happening right now, the U.S. federal government is clearly fighting a proxy war with Russia in Ukraine. And unlike some of our other covert regime change wars, specifically the one that overthrew the democratically elected Ukrainian government to begin with, this war is...
And tricked them out of their nuclear warheads.
Exactly. This economic war so far has cost $112 billion. I have to look at that twice.
It's this morning.
This morning.
113 by tonight.
113 by tonight. Billion of our dollars that they're taking either directly or through inflation. And Ukrainian President Zelensky.
I'm against it.
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I'm going to the case. So maybe talk just a little bit about maybe not specifically the Ukraine situation, but also a number of other kinetic wars and subversive wars that the U.S. is fighting around the world.
Thanks. Yeah, we've been through a lot of subversive wars. I'm not sure we can any longer categorize Ukraine as a proxy war or a subversive war. The President of the United States was there recently. We have nearly 1,000, wait for the word, troops in Ukraine today. At some point, you have to stop calling it a proxy war and acknowledging that the United States is at war again. And that makes it virtually continuously since the Fed. Yeah, see, I'm going back. Well, no, yeah, okay, well, at the very least since the late 80s, right? Look, it is true that we have a problem with the incentive system that is set up for our federal government. Politicians are taking resources and too often our very lives in order to conglomerate power to themselves and to use it in a way that advances their particular incentives and advantages at our expense. We need to stand up for the idea that a military intervention has to require a declaration of war. I would go one step further. I would say a declaration of war should be subject to approval by the states. We must make this as difficult as absolutely possible. And by the way, sending $112.5 billion to Ukraine is a military intervention. Let's not be silly about this. Much of what we're sending to Ukraine is manufactured specifically for them. This is not stuff that was laying around on the back porch of Funk and Wagnalls in some residential city in Poland. This is stuff that we're manufacturing today in order to send over there, the same way we would if we were at war to defend our borders, which we're not. We need to get out of situations like NATO, where we incentivize other countries to spend less. We ask them to do less than they otherwise would because we're afraid of being dragged in ourselves. It's really weird with the incentive systems that we put in place. So we need to cut back how much we're spending dramatically and make it much more difficult for us to get into these situations in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much. Next up, war, yeah, what is it good for?
It's good for death. I mean, that's what wars produce, death. You know, the biggest mistake in this country's history, the biggest mistake, was the conversion of the federal government to a national security state. We start out as a limited government republic. It's a totally different governmental system. A national security state, the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA, to a certain extent the FBI, is a totalitarian form of governmental structure. That's where we got the state-sponsored assassinations, the torture. The other big mistake was the abandonment of America's foreign policy of non-intervention. Combine those two, and that's why we are perilously close to nuclear war right now. All life-destroying nuclear war in Ukraine, just like the Pentagon did back in '62 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And make no mistake about it, this is not just Biden. This is the Pentagon and the CIA that have ginned up this crisis with Russia, just like they're ginning up the crisis over Taiwan with China. Because a national security state needs official enemies. They need crises. They need official enemies like in Orwell's 1984 to get everybody all hyped up and scared and supporting their ever-increasing feeding at the public trough with their defense contractors. That's why I say dismantle this whole apparatus, including the Empire military bases. Fort Bragg, what do we need all these military bases here in the United States for? What are they good for? Discharge the soldiers back in the private sector. I speak with some military background in this. I'm a graduate of Virginia Military Institute. I was an infantry officer. I trained at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I'm telling you that you don't need this giant apparatus if your sole purpose of government is to protect your nation from an attack or an invasion. And right now, there is no possibility that any nation state in the world can cross the oceans and come and invade the United States. Now we should be dismantling this entire apparatus and restoring a free society.
Thank you so much. I would review the last word, as President Zelensky may have said, how many of our sons and daughters should we sacrifice to preserve the profits of Lockheed Martin?
I believe. So I just want to say this, it's important when we're talking about foreign policy, when we're talking about the human cost of war. What got me involved in this was having friends getting sent over to Iraq, and me seeing the waste that was. It's not just a waste of money, hundreds of billions of dollars, it's a waste of human lives, and not just American lives. There are Ukrainian and Russian lives that are, of course, being affected by all this. We have to be able to call out what it is. We have a world of authoritarian governments that, again, seek to create conflict with each other to gin up support. And it's important for us to not just say, we're doing it on our end. Vladimir Putin is not a great guy either. He's doing it on his end. You can say Vladimir Putin is a terrible authoritarian without saying you want to arm the Ukrainian military. I just did it right now. And that's the truth. No amount of anything taken through coercion can be called charity. That's not what we're doing to the people of Ukraine. We are forcibly taking money out of people's pockets and putting it over there. I am all for, if you want to voluntarily give your money to help the people of Ukraine, the refugees, the dissidents from Russia who want to get out of there and not have to live in Russia anymore, by all means, empty your pockets, be empathic and be good and do that. Hell, if you want to give Lockheed Martin your money to go send drones overseas with your Mark Hamill, go right ahead and do it. Just don't ask me to do that with my taxpayer money, because as somebody who abhors war and has seen the effects of people who come home from war with scars, seen and unseen, it is immoral, it is wrong to be doing that with the function of government. So I am all for, hey, if you want to go fight in Ukraine, suit up, buddy, go and fight in Ukraine. But don't ask the people who are taking an oath to defend this country to go fight overseas. Because that's what we did in Iraq, it's what we did in Afghanistan, it's what we've done in countries all over the world. We're still doing it in Syria right now. And so that's what we have to be opposing. The entire military-industrial complex, from the ground up, is rotten to the core. And we have to be able to speak up to that. And when I say that, I say I am anti-war to the core. I will never, as president, send somebody off to go fight somebody else's war. And that's the truth. They are there to defend us, defend our liberty, and we need to honor that contract that we have made with the servicemen and women in America. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, although this would be lovely to have for another 2 hours, that's all the time we have available for us today. I want to have a big round of applause, please, for our partners. Each one of them is so clearly better than any public